Hey guys, today I'm going to teach you how a simple concept from the game of chess can make you a master salesman, even if you don't play the game or have any interest in learning. So basically, the point to chess is that it's a strategy game, and it works because strategy is universally applicable. So you can apply the strategies that you learn in chess to any area of your life, and you can also do the inverse as well. So if you're a super aggressive person in the sales field who goes out there and tries to strong arm people into agreeing with him and threatening or bullying or whatever, and you're trying to get people to feel like they have to say yes, and like this guy won't stop asking, or he's putting so much pressure on me, I feel like I have to give in. And that's the people that will call and be like, oh yeah, we're in your area, what time is best for you to do an appointment? It's like, I don't even understand what you're selling. Like, I don't know who you are, I don't know who's showing up. And those people will get clients and leads to sign up and to agree because they're so forceful. It's kind of a volume thing, but they make a lot of enemies along the way. They upset a lot of people, and they expend a lot of energy doing that. They have a super high return rate. So even if you do get those jobs sold, you end up not actually making any money. And usually what will happen in a sales environment is that those people will cycle through very quickly. So they'll come in, they'll generate a bunch of motion, and it looks like they're doing something, but in reality, they're just muddy in the waters, and not much of what they produce actually converts into something meaningful. You never get referrals. And so in chess, people do the same thing, where they try to start with a very aggressive game where they're basically just attacking pieces. Okay. Now, the defense to that, because the proper way to play chess is to first develop your pieces and build a base, right? And so if you understand that one basic fundamental, what happens is while this person's attacking and harassing your pieces, and you're just slowly developing and building up a good foundation from which to begin advancing incrementally, it's very hard to stop that person because you have control over the center of the board. And I know that might sound a little bit abstract if you don't actually play the game, but think about it in this sense. If you're trying to move your pieces around, and don't worry, this does apply to sales. If you're trying to move your pieces around on a board and the enemy controls the center, so you can't move something anywhere without it becoming a target, and it's difficult to even get to that position in the first place because you have to go around the enemy's defenses. Whereas this person's just slowly building and incrementally pushing forward, and they're not necessarily trying to do these big flashy attacks or anything, but they're following the fundamentals of the game, which is that you have to develop your pieces into a way that they have space to operate. Because if you have the best piece, if you have a queen, but it can't move anywhere, it's useless, right? And so the same thing applies to sales. When you understand the fundamentals of the game that you're playing and you just follow those things, it might not look like you're winning at first. It might feel like you are falling behind, and that these people who have a flashier personality and this more intricate pitch or whatever it is, and they're like really smooth with the objections and whatnot, it might seem like you're losing to those people. However, you are building a different type of foundation. You're playing a totally different game than they are. Well, maybe that's not true. You are playing the same game, but you're playing in a very different way because you have different strategy. And so what are the fundamentals of chess? Well, not super relevant to the video, but when you understand the handful, it's like 5 or 6 different things, and you just follow those rules very simply. You don't have to calculate everything that could possibly happen. You don't have to sit there and try to analyze and computate, well, if he moves here, here, and there, and then I move this, this, and this. It's like, there's too many outcomes. There's too many things that could happen. You get paralysis by analysis. On the other hand, if you have a couple of very simple operating principles and you know these strategies work all of the time, it's always the best move to take, I can just follow those and I don't need to think more than maybe 2 steps ahead. Well, the same thing applies to sales. You don't need to memorize a ton of information. You don't need to know the answer to every single objection in the book. You just have to know a couple of things. And if you will just follow those very simple rules, you'll be good. So what are those rules, according to me? Well, I would say that the 3 components of sales, the 3 fundamental principles that you have to understand and obey, otherwise you're screwed. If you violate any of these things, you're done. clarity, control, and confidence. And let's break those down. So clarity would apply to, it's a two-way street. So you have to understand, one, what you're selling and who you're selling it to. The person has to understand what is being sold to them, right? Now, obviously, there are situations where if you're going to use propaganda and semantic verbal tricks where you could, maneuver people into buying things that they don't understand. However, it's not sustainable. And when your business principles are based on unethical means, that will catch up to you at some point. It may not be quick. You may have a lot of early success and you may think that you can outrun the problems. But the thing is that you have to constantly outrun the problems, and you will never have any rest in this life because you'll have so many enemies and you'll have so much crap built up behind you. And of course you develop like, this is the way that you think. And people who follow good business principles and just good moral ethic principles, those people won't want to work with you. They won't want to do business with you. And so you'll isolate yourself into the realm of people that are looking to manipulate and take advantage. And that's just going to make you paranoid. It's going to make you be in this position where you're getting taken advantage of as well, which you deserve because you're doing it to other people. But the point is, the person needs to have clarity on what they're buying. And that's pretty simple, right? You just need to understand how to explain things, and you need to develop a sense, and this is through practice, of how do I communicate my ideas in a way that is understood by the recipient. So I may think that I'm being very clear about something if I'm super analytical, right? And I have this problem where I'm like, hey, I explained the problem to you, therefore you know what it is, right? Whereas somebody that's very emotional, they don't get it, right? Because they're not thinking in those terms. And so you have to learn to communicate not just the technicalities of what this is, but what is the end result in their language? How does this make you feel at the end of the day? Like, is it, so in life insurance, like, you need to push the fact that they're going to feel secure, that they can rest assured that their family will be provided for should they pass away, unfortunately. If it's solar, for example, it could be, that they feel, it depends on the person. And that's the point that I'm making. So a great learning moment for me, this is probably the best story to illustrate it. It was a breakthrough. I was knocking doors, and I was doing it kind of in the city. I live near Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was kind of having some intermediate success. And I went into the more rural areas, and I'm talking to this dude. I'm just like, man, like, he's got a big Trump flag on his door. He's got a super old, rusty, beat up pickup truck. He's got, posted, I own guns signs everywhere. I'm just like, I grew up with these people. Like, I get it. And I'm just thinking, like, this guy doesn't care about technology. Like, there's no way that he's going to want this thing. Like, he doesn't believe in any of the things that work down in the city about global warming and renewable energy. And it just occurred to me, I was like, you know what? I'm talking to this guy, mid-sentence. I'm like, hey, man, have you ever seen those big solar farms on the side of the road? It's like just those panels for miles and miles. He's like, yeah. Well, the government just passed a law. I think it's like 33% or something of all of our power has to come from renewable sources by a certain amount of time. Biden just passed it. And I started leaning into like this idea that, the president that I knew he obviously didn't like was forcing him to use solar power, and that he wasn't reaping the benefit of it. But if you sign up with us, what will happen is you will own your power. Ooh, the American dream, freedom, I own things. And so I just leaned into that idea, like the feeling of freedom and independence. And he obviously wasn't a technical person. So I didn't focus on like, how much money will this save you? I focused on the idea of ownership, the idea of freedom, the idea that he would not be getting screwed over by the government. Is that true? I don't know, kind of. In a sense, it comes down to perception, I don't think that that's real freedom. I don't think that owning your house is real freedom, because they can come and take it whenever they want. The government's got guns, and they have a billion laws that they could say you violated. And if you don't give up your house, then you're, subject to forceful removal. I don't know. So is that going to happen though? Probably not. I hope not. So it's technically true. Is it a lie? I don't know. I don't really think so. At the end of the day, I'm trying to cater to the person that I'm speaking with. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say that it's going to do something that it's not. But the problem is that he's stuck in this frame where he's only seeing solar as a negative thing, and so he's not seeing it clearly, right? Now, if I can just make it palatable to him, and I can frame it in language that he understands, in a context that he is familiar with and comfortable with, he can look at it in a different light. Then he can make the analytical decision. If he still decides, no, this isn't right for me, cool. I just want to get him out of this, the frozen state that he has this predetermined idea of what the product is. And I have to break that super hard. Now I went back to Charlotte and I said, hey guys, you know those solar farms that you see on the side of the road? Yeah, it's part of a great initiative that is helping save the planet. And I just went at it from the other angle. I talked about how, you know, a certain amount of your power is renewable. It's the same pitch, except I focused on the idea of unity and helping and a little bit of like, you feel guilty for being white, so let's, you know, make some amends there. Do I believe in that? Well, in their world, it's true. And they just see it as this is an expensive product that I can't afford, and I'm not even open to the conversation. But if I can break it down in a political sense, and I can speak to the language, to the feeling, the emotion, it's more palatable. Okay, so clarity is obviously on the side of the person who is being sold to. However, you also have to learn to discriminate, which is exactly what I did. You go into a neighborhood and you see a bunch of red brick houses with messy porches cluttered with garden gnomes, and there's an old beat up Mercury rusted out in the driveway. That is an old person who lives there. And if it's all those houses, you're not selling a brand new technology to someone on fixed income, right? They don't care, they don't want it, they probably can't afford it. It probably won't help them that much. And they're gonna talk your ear off for hours and hours. It's a waste of time. Right? So you learn to discriminate and you say, okay, these are the patterns of people that buy. When I was selling cars, say what you will, I didn't bother showing black people to the Toyotas. They don't want it. They want the Chevy Malibus. They want the Nissan Altimas. They want the Dodge Chargers. I'm not here to judge. I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. I'm just saying for whatever reason, that's what they prefer. Why would I waste my breath trying to sell them a Subaru? They don't want it. It's a waste of time. So you need to learn to recognize patterns, and you will, if you're, reasonable and you're not trying to lie to yourself. So, I can't discriminate. Like, no, like we're wired for pattern recognition. Use that to your advantage. Understand that there's certain red flags in the way people present themselves. Like they walk in the door and this person's going to waste my time. Now, there's obviously the other side of that where like, the hillbilly that walks in barefoot that you have to make him put shoes on, and he's looking at the most expensive cars on the lot. He barely speaks a word of English, doesn't have an email, writes his signature as an X, and doesn't have a valid driver's license, but he pulls out a wad of 90 grand cash that's in his pocket. Yeah, that happens sometimes. I'm not saying it doesn't, right? But in general, to become an efficient salesman, you need to have clarity on who you're selling to. You need to understand that there's certain categories of people, and based on their age, their various demographics, their gender, their ethnicity, they have certain values. There's certain things that they are looking for. Like me as a 30-year-old has a very different set of values than me as an 18-year-old when I bought my first car. Me as a 40-year-old, hopefully, will be buying a much more expensive car, right? But at the same time, I care about different things at different stages in my life. That's true of everybody, right? You're not going to have the same pitch to a 30-year-old woman as you would to an 80-year-old man, whatever it is that you're selling. That seems obvious, but where people mess that up is they don't look for clarity on people's temperament. How do you learn this, by the way? Repetition and attention. You have to be careful and intentional about every single person that you interact with. You need to treat it as a learning opportunity, and you need to take something away from every single conversation. If you will just do that for a couple months and also take the initiative to have as many of those conversations as you can, you will be fine. I'm telling you. But you need to understand people's temperament. Like, are you selling to somebody with a big ego? Well, there's certain things you need to be aware of, and we're going to talk about that here in a second on the control aspect, but you don't want to rub them the wrong way, right? You don't want to challenge their authority in a way that makes them feel insecure. However, you can also use that insecurity to show how that product would make them more special or something. I don't know. So you need to understand people's mindsets, people's temperament. You need to be very clear on the person that you're dealing with. Now, that comes down to understanding the rules of the game, that you're playing against an opponent. In a sense, we're using the chess analogy. You're playing against an opponent. I'm not saying trying to crush them, but you're trying to have a fun sporting match, in good spirits. But you are trying to beat them in a sense, because they're trying to outmaneuver you. Either they don't want the product yet, and you're trying to persuade them that they do, and that's the game. Or maybe they came in to buy a car, you're the gatekeeper, they want to get the best deal that they can, and they're going to try to take you for a ride, but you want them to ride out with a high payment. I don't know. I'm not good at the jokes. I'm sorry. But the point is that you are engaged in a battle of wits in some way. And you don't have to be super smart to win that. You just have to understand the principles. Once you know thy enemy, you will be in a much better position to make further moves, because simple things should stand out, right? Like, this person's insecure. Okay, don't say these certain things. This person's really needy. Okay, well, there's ways that you can tailor your communication to that situation. But control is where things get interesting. So, and this is where we're going to lean a bit more on the chess analogy. So there's a couple things that you need for control. One is you need trust. They've got to trust you. You've got to establish that you are someone who's not trying to screw them over, right? And it's hard to do when you're a salesman, because they're kind of primed to know that you're trying to get one over on them, and you may be in some sense. And if you're lying about that and you're trying to hide it, you need to either be a really good liar or you're going to get caught, right? And I would advise that you find ways to actually just take care of people. But be that as it may, for them to trust you is super important. They have to trust not just that you're being honest, but that you are an expert and that your opinion carries authority. They also have to trust the organization that you represent. So if you're selling for yourself, it can be a little bit easier in some ways. I feel like that's definitely been my experience lately, is that, I don't have a problem pushing people and, trying to sell something, because I know that I'm the one backing it up and I know how hard I will work for people. It's a little bit harder when you're selling, say, used cars and the dealership has a bad reputation. It is what it is. It's difficult, right? So you have to find ways to increase their trust. And I learned this from Jordan Belfort, by the way, when you don't do that, what you have happen is that you get objection hopping. So they say, I can't buy, is the price. Okay, well, what if we can cut this deal? Well, I got to talk to my wife. Well, overcome that objection, make it seem, silly, whatever. Like, are you not a man? Like, you have to ask your wife for permission to do. I'm just kidding. I believe that, but most people don't. It'll get you yelled at. But you find, the way to overcome that objection, and then it's something else. Then there's a problem with the product. Okay, you address that. You show them the research to show that this is actually the best product, and they don't need to worry about that. Those fears are unfounded, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just one thing after another. And you're like, well, man, like, you can't pin this person down. Well, because they're giving you a smokescreen. None of those are the real problems. It's usually something, and when you start having those that happen where they're going back and forth, it's really good to work in things about how trustworthy your company is. Well, we've been in business X number of years. We're veteran founded. I picked up this in the military. I use that a lot because some people trust military members, some people really don't, and I don't blame them either way. But if you can find ways to kind of throw out there your Better Business Bureau rating or testimonials and case studies from other clients, anything that you can do to improve your trust in their eyes and the trust of their company. All right. And then you've got to understand that there's also a dynamic taking place where both of you are fighting for a certain frame. So for example, I call someone up and say, hey, I can offer you this service. And they go, well, I've been in business 20 years. I never used it. Okay. Well, if I try to argue with you, then I'm challenging your statement that you're an expert and you're going to hang up on me, right? Somebody wants to talk to somebody that calls them and tells them that you actually don't know what you're doing, even though it's been your career for however long. So you've got to find a way to address that without becoming without playing into their hands. Because if you become needy and you start saying, oh, well, let me prove myself to you, well, then you're accepting their frame that they're the expert. You're trying to prove yourself to them, right? Whereas if you will position yourself in such a way as an equal, for example, oh, that's perfect. You understand then the value of what I'm presenting to you, or, if it's something that saves you time, well, perfect. You understand that time is money, and doing this aspect of the job costs a lot of time and money. What would it look like if you had all that time back? And then you start talking about how, well, I can actually not only give you that time back, but I'll improve your profitability so much that I pay for myself. So you're not only getting the time back, you're getting the money back. What do you think you could do with that? Would you rest, or would you maybe start to scale your business? Are there other things that you can handle? And so, and the exact verbiage is always, useful to have nailed down. But the idea is that, okay, you're presenting yourself as the expert, the person that is in charge, basically. I'm some guy on the phone and you're defending yourself. Okay, if I push back and get confrontational with you, what is that going to do? Well, nothing good for me. It's going to start an argument. Again, some people like to argue, but that's not how you get clients. That's not persuasion. That's not even convincing somebody. It's just beating them down, and that person's going to flake out on you. That person's going to tell you whatever you want to hear, and they're going to ghost you, right? So you need to understand, the same way that on a chessboard, you don't just move pieces randomly. And in a sales pitch, you don't just throw out random ideas, right? You have a plan of action. You got the script, right? But you need to understand that when you're in these conversations, one, you're looking to understand the other person better. You're trying to get clear on exactly who am I talking to, and also how by extension, how can I convey my position and my offer more clearly to you? How can I tailor it so that it makes sense to you as an individual? And also, how do I maintain a certain amount of control, right? If you're speaking to someone who is lost in the sauce, they're talking about fishing, they're talking about when they went to Chicago that one time, they're talking about their grandkids, it's like, most sales situations, it's not appropriate, right? And people will do that. They will get distracted, but you need to professionally, politely, and tactfully bring them back to the point at hand. Because if they go to the doctor and start rambling on about whatever, doctor's gonna be like, great, so here's what I'm prescribing, right? You need the exact same thing. Otherwise, you don't look like an expert. You look like someone who's trying to be their friend, but they know that you don't give a shit about them. You're not there to be their friend. You didn't knock on their door or call them out of the blue because you're interested in them as a person who has something to sell. And if you are apologetic for that and try to play games, their BS detector goes up through the roof. So instead, you need to understand that I am the expert here. I'm the source of information that's going to educate you about this product. And I'm going to help guide you through the process of purchasing it. And that is your position. The minute you lose that, like, you don't have control over the center of the board anymore. And you don't have to be an expert in chess to know that you need to keep your important pieces in the center of the board. And if you just understand that concept, then figuring out how to do that, which is going to be different every single game that you play, is something that you can figure out. Right? Okay, I need to put something here, but it's in danger. Okay, well, I need to put something else here to defend it. Right? If you understand that, hey, I'm in this conversation, I need to control a certain frame. Not to control in like a manipulative sense, like I'm going to force somebody to do something, just that I am not losing my position, that I am the expert, that I'm guiding you through this process. And from that standpoint, it's okay if you don't have the answer to a question. Like, whatever your job is now, if you've been doing it for 5 years, 2 years, a year, 6 months, if somebody asks you a question and you're in charge, right? You do this all the time, you're not going to be threatened or humiliated or feel insecure when you don't know the answer. Oh, I don't know. Let's find out. It's not a big deal. I don't know how to overcome this objection. Well, what we can do, we can call my boss real quick and we can... You look like an idiot. Any frame that you built up is totally shattered there. Never give up your position as the authority in that conversation. And that doesn't have to be a dishonest thing, because you don't have to say that you're an expert when you're not. You just have to act like one. And you have to have the solution to very specific problems, right? If I'm selling a car, I don't need to know everything about cars. I don't know anything about the mechanics of a car. I really don't. The only reason I know anything about the types of cars is because I sold them. And I didn't know that when I started selling them. That was like months later, a year later even. So you don't need to know everything about every vehicle out there. You just need to understand how to help them pick the right one and how to guide them through the process of securing that vehicle. That's it. Same thing with anything else that you sell. You need to find what are those choke points. What are the real problems that they need me for? Because they can go online and Google all this stuff. What are the things that I have to offer of value that will keep me in a position of control? Even if we decide, hey, I don't know the answer to this, let me get back to you. How much are loads going for in this area with this type of equipment? That's a great question. I actually haven't run that before because of XYZ, but here's what I can do to come up with a market analysis that, implicitly I'm saying you could not come up with this. I'm not saying that in a rude or direct way, but look, I have these tools, or I have this specific knowledge, or I have the ability to process data in a way that, you don't. You don't say that verbatim. You just let them know this is the value that I provide. And hey, actually, would you rather work with somebody who knows everything or acts like they know everything? Because you know that they don't. Would you rather work with somebody who is competent enough to learn very quickly and is honest with you and makes those adjustments as needed, right? Okay. So control is obviously very important. And you can do that with a lot of little maneuvers and tactics and strategies. But at the end of the day, you just need to remember, what are the dynamics that are taking place? Is this person trying to force me out of the equation? Are they trying to elevate themselves above me in some way? And it's not for you to get combative. It's for you to, this is subtle, tactfully maneuver back into that situation where you are equals as people. But in terms of knowledge about this thing, you have a certain amount of authority that they do not have. Even if they know more about it than you do, there are things that you can do for them that have value. And you just need to find what those things are, because that is your leverage. Leverage is value. You don't have authority over somebody that you cold called unless you have something that they want and you can offer it to them on your terms. Okay. The last piece of this is confidence. Now, this isn't brash confidence. This isn't go out there and psych yourself up with motivational videos and slap the table before you do your team chant and whatever. Like, yes, there is a certain amount of just being confident and going out and talking to people, but it really comes down more to boldness, right? It comes more down to the idea that you are going to have the conversation, even if it scares you. But when you do have the conversation, that you don't apologize for your position. A lot of people apologize for what they're selling for. Yeah, I'm sorry the market's this way. Yeah, I'm sorry the price is so high. Yeah, I'm sorry that this is the deal. Yeah, I'm sorry these are the terms. And they don't even necessarily say the word sorry, but they convey that they're apologetic. And that's what really destroys things, because then it doesn't feel the same. If I'm signing up for a service and somebody's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's so expensive. Like, well, is it less expensive somewhere else for the same value? Is there a reason that it's so expensive? These people are trying to price gouge me? Like, what's going on? And it really comes down more to your mannerisms, your implicit communication. But the way to develop the impression of confidence is through repetition. You've got to intentionally go into every conversation knowing that you are bringing something to the table that is irreplaceable. It may not be knowledge, it may not be experience, it may not be, the best offer, the best deal, but there is something about you as a person and about what you are selling that is maybe not totally unique in the sense that you couldn't find something else anywhere in the market, but it is unique and it is valuable in the sense that there's something that this person specifically has never heard before, and you got to find the best way to present it, right? Like whatever, like you only have so much to work with. If you're working for somebody else, you can't necessarily dictate what the offer is. You can maybe work on the language of the pitch, and that's honestly enough. If you're selling your own thing, yes, you can adjust the offer, but you want to find the clearest way to communicate that, because there's always a better way to say something, right? You can go to 100 doors and tell people that you're selling solar that will last for a couple of years. It's going to be kind of expensive. It might save you a few bucks, right? Or you can go to those doors and say, look, this is a fixed price. It's never going to go up. You're protected from inflation. You have ownership over your power, etc. Like whatever. It's the same thing either way, right? Like there's pros and cons to anything, and people are going to challenge you on those things. But it's understanding that you stick to the frame, that this is the best case scenario. Doesn't mean that you lie. Doesn't mean that you mislead anybody. You just, you give them the best offer that you can. All right. And then the way that you kind of deal with building things ethically is that, one, again, you don't lie to somebody. And if you give them all the information and they still say no, they're still not interested. And it's not because they're like on the fence. They're just, it's not right for them. They don't want it for whatever reason. Okay, walk away. You don't have to sell everybody. People get so fixated on that. So that's the confidence aspect. Understanding that since you're positioned in the way that you are, you have a certain amount of authority. It may take time for that to internalize for you, but if you will just put the reps in, it'll come. But how do you do this? Practically speaking, so the last thing that I'll talk about, and I'll be super quick. If you will just focus on one thing every single day. So if you're playing chess, you play a game, and then you realize, okay, my development was really bad. So you just focus on that for the next game, or you drill that for a little while. Then you realize, I'm really making a lot of mistakes. How do I stop making mistakes? I'm just going to focus on every single time I move a piece, I'm going to check to make sure that I'm not moving it into danger inadvertently. Like sometimes you move pieces into danger on purpose, but it's not an accident, right? Something's not going to come up and get it. And then you start to realize, okay, well, I'm getting better about that. However, there's like 2 or 3 moves down the line, I'm starting to realize there's problems I could foresee if I just put a little more thought into it. Okay, so now I'm going to think 2 steps ahead for everything. And then you just find different aspects of the game. And then you realize, okay, I'm doing great up until the end, and then I'm getting slaughtered in the end game. What do I do about that? Okay, so you do some drills, you watch some videos, you do some research. And then, you work on the tactical puzzles and whatever else. You can't master every aspect of the game at once. It's the same thing with sales. So this is what I did when I was going door to door. The first week, it wasn't like literally a week, but I realized, okay, I'm really struggling with the pitch, right? I'm getting nervous. So I just said, okay, my only goal for today is to get the pitch as smoothly as possible and to get through the whole thing, to not stutter, and to just make it good and smooth. Beyond that, I don't need to worry about anything. Did that. Next day I realized, you know what? I'm skipping a lot of houses and I'm feeling a lot of anxiety, and I'm not really like going into these situations confidently. So today I'm just breaking that fear of going up to the door. So even if it's obviously a house that I probably should not knock, I'm going to go knock it. Not because I expect to sell anything, because I want to establish the habit of taking action. And I don't want it to even be a question in my mind that I'm skipping something because of discomfort or fear or anything like that. And so eventually, once I had gotten that habit and I was like, actually, that's a waste of time, and I'm past that point of developing the habit, sure, then I go ahead and skip that house. Then the next day after that, okay, I'm doing great at the pitch. I'm going to all the houses. However, I'm really struggling with the discomfort of pushing through objections. Okay, so today, the only thing I'm worried about is answering at least one objection. I just had to do one though. So somebody's super confrontational and I'm freaked out, and I can just feel them staring into my soul during the pitch. I still have to ask for the sale. And then when they say no, handle that, right? They give me one reason, I handle that, then I can leave. And no matter how afraid I am, no matter how uncomfortable or nervous I am, I have to do that one. But if I just get through that one, I can leave. That's manageable, right? It's a step up from the pitch. And it's not necessarily going to make you a lot of sales. However, it does help you develop better habits, and it's a step that you can actually take on and overcome. Then the next day, okay, now it's 2 objections. The next day is 3 objections, and so on. And at that point, you start looking at the nuance, like what tone am I asking certain questions in? What's the cadence? What's the rhythm? What's the speed? Whatever. And then, within a week, you've gone from struggling to go up to a door and to get the words out to you're going through the whole process, right? And then you start to go into different aspects of the game. And that's all this is. It's a game. And if you take it really seriously and you take every failure and every rejection to heart, you're never going to get good at it. You have to understand that you're playing a game in a like a broad, a wide angle lens, that you are, all of these little battles are adding up to the war in a sense, right? These little skirmishes with people are building up to you being rich, basically. But on an individual level, you're also going through the same game on a microcosm with these individual people. And when you start to look at it that way, it stops being a thing where like, oh, they rejected me, it sucks, to, okay, how did they outmaneuver me? Where did I make this mistake? How can I improve my skills a little bit? And once you get that down, it gets easy. Not easy in the sense that you have to put work in, but easy in the sense that you know what you need to do because you're operating from a principle-based approach. You have a strategy. Your strategy is not, I'm going to go nail them with this pitch. I'm going to go beat them over the head with all these objection busters. It's no. I need to get clarity on the person I'm talking to. What kind of questions can I ask to understand them better? How can I present this in a better way? And then as I'm doing that, I start to realize, you know what? They're playing these little subtle games with me where they're trying to like put me down, not necessarily in a rude way, but they're trying to be aloof and to stay back and not get invested in the conversation. How can I draw them in? And once I draw them in, how can I kind of start to lead them down these certain paths? And again, not to like force a decision, but to at least make them think about it rationally and to give them a little bit of a push, maybe if it's appropriate. But once you understand, okay, how am I losing control? You're not going to win every game. You're not going to make every sale. But when you look at it from this sense, you go, oh, okay, I see it was that little subtle maneuver. And it's really difficult to see those things when you're looking at it as, where did the conversation go sideways? Well, if you don't have great social skills, then when you think about a conversation going sideways, you're thinking, well, every conversation goes sideways. I'm an outsider looking in. I don't really get the social thing. And if you're great with people, if you're a people person, you're extroverted, like you're naturally, fluent in social skills, then you don't consciously know what you're doing anyway. I don't know what's going on. So instead you think about something very specific and manageable. Where did I lose control? Do I have clarity on the person? Do I know my enemy, quote unquote? Don't take that too literally. Am I approaching this in the right way? Am I leveraging my value appropriately? And am I doing so confidently? Am I asking for the sale and then apologizing? Or am I telling them this is the price? What do you charge? 8%. How much is it going to cost me? $500. Whatever it is. You don't need to apologize for things. You're comfortable using silence as a tool, not in an aggressive way, not in a confrontational way, but just because you don't need to over-explain yourself. Yeah, you need to explain the concept when you first get into it with somebody, but once they know what you're talking about, when it gets to negotiation, you don't want to make that mistake. And also, you're never going to get to that point where you can do this if you don't have the confidence and the self-belief to just go talk to people. And that's all it is. You can forget every tactic and trick that you have ever heard about sales if you will just be confident enough to go to people and to at least try. And you understand that in that interaction, people are not, the cardboard cutouts. Like, yes, there are different categories and discriminate. However, you need to understand this person. You need to get clarity on who they are and how they communicate. And you need to communicate in such a way as to appeal to them as an individual, not how you think things should be said or done. And you need to understand that there's if somebody wants the product if they have a need for it, they're in the market, they're interested in buying. If you follow these rules, you will have a good close rate. There will be, if you're prospecting, if you're knocking doors, for example, like it might be 5 people out of every 100 that are even like kind of worth talking to, right? But you got to go through that 100 to get to the 5. It's those 5 that you have to really focus on and understand that they're the ones that are going to try to play games. Everyone else isn't trying to play games. They're trying to get out of the conversation because they have zero interest. And you need to learn to discern between those people and the ones who are, available for the conversation, but are trying to outmaneuver you in some way, because nobody wants to get taken advantage of. Nobody wants to feel like they got sold to. They don't want to feel like they got beat or got convinced by a salesman. That's just not what they want. They're used to going on Amazon and shopping. But if you have something that you're selling, there's probably more information that needs to be had before they make that decision to purchase. And that's why there's a salesperson involved. That's why they haven't already gotten it. Like if it's a roof, like, oh, well, which roofer do I go with? What shingle do I go with? Do I even know like how the industry works? Construction is kind of foreign to me, right? So it's good to have somebody there that you can talk to. But if that person is just trying to sell, they're not understanding you. They're not trying to communicate with you in a way that makes you feel valued and understood, then you're not going to want to talk to them as an individual. You're not going to trust them. If you look their company up online, you're going to realize, oh, they have like a 2-star review. I don't trust these people, right? And if they're, worse, they're not confident in that they can help you, or they're only confident that they can sell their product and they don't necessarily understand your specific concerns. Well, why would you trust that person? So I hope this helped. But guys, if you will just learn to follow these 3 fundamental principles, you will make more sales and you will not feel overwhelmed and out of your depth every time a conversation takes a detour that you weren't expecting. And you can go into every single interaction with the confidence that you need to have, because you have a system, you have a strategy, and you can always figure out in chess what the next move needs to be, even if you don't understand like these complicated strategies and tactics. If you just know that there's a few principles that you follow, you know how to think about every single move. It's the same thing with sales. It's the same thing with business. And with a little bit of practice, I believe that you guys can get there. So good luck. Thank you for listening. I will see you soon.